It's nice to meet you all. My name is Akki El Kaakour. I'm in Swaziland since 2012. Um, Myself and my wife, we run here a volunteer-driven mentorship program. It's called Royal Rangers. It's a scouting mentorship organization that is operating worldwide. We currently have roughly 52, 54 local volunteers in the age between 15 and 22, 23. But more interestingly, and this is I think where I'm going to talk about today, is that we had over the last, I would say, nearly 9 years, constantly volunteers joining us from all over the world, from Canada, from the States, from Germany, UK, South Africa, and Sweden. We have worked with teams, we have worked with groups of people, of volunteers. So there's a constant rotation of short and long-term volunteers that are involved in us or involved with us. But before I jump straight into this topic, I would like to introduce a little bit more about myself to give a bit background why I may or may not qualify for this topic. So as I said, I was born and raised in Germany. I studied social work, and then I did my master's degree it's called Adventure and Outdoor Education. In the UK, it's very big. I think it's called experiential learning, and it's based on the Outward Bound system, which is very big in the UK and also in the States. My plan was to go to Canada afterwards and to work for good money in an outdoor area, but God challenged me to spend some time to volunteer to serve in South Africa and Cape Town. And long story short, I moved to South Africa and worked for 6 months in an organization, also Royal Rangers, in the same organization that I have been in since I'm 11, and volunteered here for 6 months. And this time there were doors opened that I was able to go to Eswatini and to volunteer here for a very short time in Bulembo to run some kids camps. And well, I met my lovely wife, Alison, and we got married and have by now 2 kids. And yeah, so before we got married, I moved back to Germany for a very short time because God put on my heart, hey, you should go to Eswatini. This is the place where I want you. And I went back for 6 months to raise funds in Germany, because my first part here, the first years, I was not paid, or I was little paid, and from this amount that I was paid, I would not be able to eat bread. It's more like a token of appreciation, volunteer appreciation. So I was working another 2 years or years to come as a long-term volunteer here in Bulembo. I grew up in the church in Germany, and in Germany the volunteer culture is very big. So you volunteer in sport clubs, you volunteer in different organizations, you volunteer wherever you go. Church is volunteer driven. And I also volunteered in Pembroke in Wales in the National Trust for 3-4 months. So I had a lot of different experiences on the volunteer side. And then I started working here in Eswatini, and we started working in Eswatini. And since 2013, just before we got married, we had the first teams to come and join us for first like a week and then for 2 weeks. And they helped working specifically on projects. And these were kind of like the first short-term volunteers that I was involved with here in Eswatini. And then it picked up in 2014 that we had the first 6 months volunteer. Then we had another volunteer that came from a university to work under me in her practical semester. And it kind of like picked up from 2013, 2014 that we had more and more volunteers. And in the last years before COVID, we had an average between 3 and 4 international volunteers that were between 6 to 12 months with us, and local volunteers that graduated school and that came to just do an internship with us. But it's basically the same as a volunteer. And in this time, we learned a lot on working with specifically young volunteers, young people. But next to it, we always had the teams that kind of like did a volunteer tourism from specifically the Western countries to come here and work in Eswatini. And we learned a lot working with them. And I would like to share with you guys this kind of like my background and a little bit of the different cultures that I worked with and different ages that I experienced. So many people that come and start and want to go into volunteering, they want to go straight into it and don't necessarily think much, okay, what do I expect? And this was specifically when I came to South Africa the first time. I remember in August, I applied to volunteer. In October, I was already in the air flying over. So there was a month between, and I had no cultural preparation, no preparation whatsoever. My English was like beyond understandable. And I remember I was sitting in the airplane writing in my journal, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what's coming. I maybe had like 4 emails with Auntie Tammy, a good dear friend of mine now, that kind of like guided me through this journey. But I remember that it was a very, very interesting time to come to South Africa. I was prepared from my side, was eager and was ready to implement things and to bring the things that I learned in university to Swaziland, to South Africa. But I came onto the ground and it was, I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with culture, with language, with technology that at this stage was way behind Germany. So it was a lot of external factors that came to an extent, came to a point where it was a bit frustrating. And over the years, we learned to give our volunteers, when they come to Swaziland, some guidance. And I have a couple of points that specifically, if you start working as a volunteer in a place, that are very, very helpful to go by. So the first one is good communication. And this is always the first step, that when you contact an organization or an NGO or a church, that you clearly state your expectations. That what is your background? What do you expect in the volunteering time? And even when you come onto the ground, that you constantly have a good communication. When we speak to our volunteers, we say, you need to talk to us. You need to talk to us what is not good. You need to talk to us if there's something that is bothering you. Like this needs to be the base of every working staff, of every volunteer. The second part that we lay into the hands of our volunteers is to say, you need to be proactive. Being in any workplace, to be proactive is kind of like a key. Jump in where you can, get your hands dirty. This can be either practically, this can be in meetings that you bring in your ideas, because if you come from overseas or if you come from a different place, you have different experience and you can bring in new input into the group that maybe they have not thought about it. So what we, for example, do, we meet in the beginning of the week with our volunteers, and we kind of like lay out the week and discuss what are the jobs for the week, what are the tasks that the volunteers or the team should do. And specifically for the volunteers, they don't necessarily know all the things. So we had volunteers and they have to build a fence, but they have no idea how to build a fence. So for me, I tell them, you need to be proactive. You need to ask questions. You need to be coming to me and say, hey, I do not know how to do this. You need to be willing to learn. Try, fail, and try again. So this is kind of like the second point of being proactive. My third point is a commitment. And we just had before in the talk in the breakout room with Annie, as a volunteer, you don't have to be here. As a volunteer, you don't you're not put by a pastor or by a person into this place. You serve now. Now you apply. You are coming out of your own free will to volunteer. So being 100% committed means then, because you want to come, you need to put your effort in, your energy in, and because it's your free will to be here. Be 100% committed to the job, 100% committed to the work schedule, being on time, giving attention and assistance to whatever, to guests around you, to the people around you. Completing the task that is maybe given to you with the most detail that you can put into it. Give 100% of your commitment to the job that is given to you. Then the fourth point is availability. And I'm going to use an example there because we had our last group of volunteers. There's exactly where it went wrong and where it went very well. And when I wrote this seminar, or when I wrote these points down, these two ladies, or this one lady and this one young man, came into my attention, or into my mind when I thought about, okay, availability, what does it mean? And when you come from overseas, or when you come into an organization, it is very important that you focus and make yourself available for the place where you are. This means you cannot be 50% at home and 50% in your workplace, in your volunteer place. Every volunteer is going through a transition time, and the transition time normally looks like you go from home, you apply for something, but you have a very established group at home. You have a very established friendship circle at home. Then the leaving time comes and friends are celebrating with you. They're going to have a farewell party, maybe. They say goodbye in a church. You may be sent out and people tell you, hey, you're going to have so much fun and it's going to be so good. And you're excited to leave. And then you're also distancing yourself in this time from your friends. You say goodbye, you go. And then you come onto the mission field, or onto the field where you serve, and you come into like a transition time. This time is a very, very critical time, and it can go very good, or it can go very bad. It can go up or down. And with these two volunteers that we worked with just before COVID, with the one person it went up, and with the other person it went down, but we haven't done anything different with them. We had meetings with them in the same way. We had our reflection with them in the same way. We had our introduction with them in the same way. The difference with these two people were, one made themselves available and the other one did not make themselves available, because the lady was constantly on the phone, constantly engaging in the friendship circle at home, and her brain, her mind was constantly home. So she had no space mentally, spiritually, and physically to be present in the place that she was now, in her new home. And when the transition time works well, you start entering into new groups, new friendships, into new structures. You settle into it. You create a new identity in the peer group. But if this doesn't went well, or if it doesn't go well, you often get either sick, you get homesick, you get frustrated, you get insecure. And this was specifically with the one girl that was here. She became so depressed. She was not able to leave her room because she wanted to go home. She wanted to be with her friends. And the young man, his name is David. Kevin maybe have met him. He was present. He was available to be here. So what he did is, in the first 6 weeks, he told his friends back home and his family back home, I'm not going to be in contact with you. His mom and dad, they of course they asked, hey, how are you doing? And then he sent a text message, yeah, I'm fine and good is, but he was not engaging in like family conversations and stuff like this. So his phone was basically on silent for the first 6 weeks. And he made himself available to learn the culture, um, to learn the language, to learn people, to know people. And this was so interesting to see, because one person it went up and the other person it went completely down, with the same input. And as I said, the next part would be focusing on the ways of the culture and the language, to get to know the culture. One of the greatest and richest things in the world is culture. And culture is sometimes just in the neighborhood completely different. In a different church, it could be different. In a different sport club, it could be different. But if you come in and be open and willing to learn their culture, this will bring you a step forward. So David, the young man that was here, he was good in language learning. So he picked up language like crazy, and he started learning Siswati, and was engaging with the local people, and he was deeply interested in the culture, going with some of the young people to their homesteads and eating the local food and just experiencing Swaziland. And this brings me to the next part. As a volunteer, you need to live the experience. You need to be enjoying the time around new people, around new places, seeing things that you are in. This is just a couple of rewards of volunteering. The best memories that I made were in the places that I volunteered. In England, climbing on the Pembrokeshire coast. I would have never done it if I would not have volunteered. Or going with the Rangers with a scouting program to different places, volunteering. And the last part, and this is potentially the toughest for a lot of people, if you volunteer, it's not about you. It's not about you being praised and honored and going into a place and people looking up to you. No, it's about the people that you go to. It's about the people that you serve at the station. I'm using this word serve a lot because I have a Christian background and we work in a Christian organization. But when I speak about serve, it reminds me of the times of Jesus. And when you look at Jesus in, I think it's in the Gospels in general, where he is starting to wash people's feet, his disciples' feet specifically. And at this time, when you look at Jesus' background, he was a teacher, he was a rabbi. And this was not even for his disciples a job to do. This was a job for the servants, for the slaves, for, in this culture at this days, for the woman to wash people's feet. And when you think about back in the days, it was dirty, it was dusty, they didn't have good shoes. It was a nasty job to wash someone's feet. So Jesus at this stage, he went down in John 13 specifically, he went down onto his knees to wash someone else's or his disciples' feet. And Jesus is not trying to destroy authority or leadership position in any way, because leadership is important. And he is not trying to diminish this. And it also doesn't mean that as a volunteer or as a person that comes into a place to serve, that you should get abused or be the doormat. There's a book out from, his name is Richard Foster, and he writes the book Celebration of the Discipline, and he makes a very, very good and very important distinction between true service, as shown by Jesus, and self-service. And I'm going to read this for you guys. Self-service, he writes, is about choosing who and when we will serve. It's about serving to make yourself feel better. But true service means putting yourself out, not for personal glory. In God's eyes, all people are worth serving. It means acting wherever and whenever it is needed. This means, as a volunteer, to sometimes step down and to do the dirty job. these are kind of like my 7 very quick, very basic points that we give our volunteers onto their hands when they come to Swaziland, to us to work with. Because we believe if you implement these 7 points in the first 6-7 weeks normally, you will have a very good transition into your place. And I know that there's a couple of people here that run organization, and there's always the 2 sides of the coin. And this is obviously that the volunteer can put in a lot of effort and a lot of these points, but there's also some parts that the organization can do from their side. And we have, when the organization knows how to guide the volunteers, know these 7 points, it will help the organization already. But there's other points that I think are very important. And I'm going to go very quick with you through a couple of points. And the one point is, what we encourage our volunteers when they apply is to bring a friend. Because if you serve with a friend, first you share the memories, and it's going to be easier because you have someone that you bring with you. If you serve in a group, you know people, you are with people, and you go through the same stuff, but you make the same experience with them. So we encourage people to come as a group or to bring a friend with them. What we do in the beginning is we keep our volunteers from the first day busy, because it helps them to be engaged. But I'm not going to overload them on the first week with, hey, you plan a holiday program, or you plan this, or you do this. I keep the task in the first week very simple. Like in the first week, we normally do a lot of physical labor, because it's something that the group picks up very easy, and they don't have to plan a lot. They have to an extent, follow instructions, but keep the jobs in the first weeks simple, that they see a good result and they can see what they are doing and what they have done. So for example, we had the volunteers that were here 2 years ago. We built a fence with them in the first couple of weeks. They were digging holes, they were planting the poles, they were mixing cement. And the first couple of poles, I was constantly with them, and after like 3-4 days, I let them do more of the holes by themselves, mixing the cement by themselves. But when they look back, they could see what they have done in days. And it was, we built this fence. It was not me who built the fence, it was the volunteers that built the fence. So keeping the jobs simple, but keep them busy. The next part is, don't expect too much from volunteers. As I was well trained when I came to South Africa with a master's degree and had great ideas and was eager to do things, but I was completely useless in the first 2 weeks, because it was so overwhelming. It was so much that I had to learn, that I had no capacity to pour into them. So don't expect from the volunteers too much, specifically in the beginning. What I normally tell people is, our volunteers are here in an average between 6 and 12 months. So for us, we normally have the first 3 months where we put a lot of effort on training onto the volunteers. And I tell people that want volunteers, or other departments that we work together, if you accept a volunteer, you need to factor in the first 3 months, you will have double the amount of work. First, you train the volunteers, you teach them, you guide them, you correct them, you repair stuff after them because it didn't work, you do it again. So there's a lot of work in the first couple of months that you have to pour into it as an organization. But then it gets easier. And as more you put in the first week, as better it gets on the long run. But don't expect from them, when they come onto the ground, yay, we have now the qualified person and he can jump in immediately. The next part is having a person that is welcoming them, having a contact person on the ground. If something doesn't work, you come to me, you speak to me. If you have problems with me, you can go to my wife, or you can go to this person. Have clear communication people, or have clear people designated that have constant contact with them, where you have an open door for them to to bring their concerns to them. Then the next one is co-designing with a meaning. People need to need space to carry out tasks as they see fit, or as they see them. You need to offer them support, let them try out things, let them make mistakes. Think about where you can involve the people on an early stage in your project. For example, brainstorming, planning with them, designing, applying things. Let them share and let them make decisions as well. Because it's very, very important to work alongside them and not dictating every step they do. Then the next part is sometimes you have to think out of the box. And what does it mean? We have every organization has their structure, their given tasks that you do, that we run. But sometimes you have a volunteer that comes onto the ground and they're very gifted in a certain thing. Is there an option for you as an organization to use their giftings, to use their skills? And for some organizations, it's easier than for others. In our case, for example, we used to run our youth group here locally in Bulembo, and we had a young lady that was very gifted in drama. And we opened up in this year, after she was settled, we opened up a drama class. So she could put her giftings into our program, and it made our program better. But you have to think out of the box and check where the giftings of the volunteers is. Another very important part, and I think no matter if you work with volunteers that come from overseas or if you work with interns or employees, is thank you. A praise, a thank you has a big impact. Volunteer appreciation, it motivates them, it elevates them, it gives them the boost that they need. And we have, as I said in the beginning, we have currently roughly 50 local volunteers that work with us. We try on a monthly basis to have a fellowship with them, to come together, to meet them, to just spend time with them, because this is what our volunteers need. Sometimes food is involved, and food is in Bulembo, in Swaziland, it's a big thing. If you have just cookies on the table for them, they're like, feel, oh, so special. But a thank you, I appreciate you, I appreciate your work. It goes a very, very long work. Then as an organization, you have to embrace changes in volunteers, in volunteering. When I started 10 years ago to work here, a lot of my friends went out to volunteer. Today, it's not as easy anymore. People do not want to volunteer. People do not want to go and spend their own money, their own time, their own energy for something that doesn't benefit them. So you have to be, to an extent, look, what can you offer as an organization towards the volunteers? And what we, for example, do is we offer our volunteers a big amount of things. So for example, our volunteers have the opportunity to connect with the local people very well, because through our fellowships, sometimes the young men, they live together with the young boys from our organization here together in one house. There is outlets where they can meet. There's sport activities where they can meet. So we encourage them to join in, but we also offer, for example, language courses. We go with them on excursions throughout Swaziland to show them the country. They do a lot of leadership training. So after a year working with us as a volunteer, there should be something that brings them to a next level. And we speak about this. When we have volunteers apply in our organization, we explain to them what we are going through, and we explain the benefits of going through things like this. So what, as you as an organization, what can you offer them to want to come to you, to want to leave maybe a job behind, or the cozy home behind to work for your organization? And then the last thing is, as an organization, be present. present your organization on platforms. And obviously the Shine Network has a good opportunity where you can offer your application or your volunteer opportunities, but there is so many platforms and options. If you go home to a church and you speak in the church and you offer the church, hey, you can come to volunteer for us. When we go to Germany, one of the big things, because we go to Germany to raise funds for us to be here because we are missionaries, but what we do is we have an opportunity for our friends and people to come to take part in our organization, and we make this very public, and we put this on our website and it's on our flyers. You want to come to Swaziland as a team, as a church, as an organization, as a company, please do come and please do help us. Please do enjoy the goodness that we have on the ground and experience it with us. This is kind of like what we do and what I hope can help. And yeah, this is basically my 7 points for volunteers and my roughly 9 points for the organizations if you work with volunteers. Erin, over to you, or Jane.
Thank you, Akki. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really useful. As I said, we've been recording this session. I've also got your notes, so I'll be putting those out as well. I think it's a really great resource for us to refer to, or anybody who's thinking about volunteering, anybody who's taking on board volunteers. It's a really great resource to have. So thank you for sharing that, Akki. I know you've got a wealth of experience, so thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? I know we may be running a little bit late, but does anybody have any questions before we let him go?
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the point that you made, Akki, about the two people basically having the opportunity for a very similar experience, but having a very different one. And I also think, you know, as you're grooming them to make the most of their experience, I think those tips would be really helpful for people to be on the happy side of experience. I also think as a, you know, when you lead a nonprofit and you have volunteers, really paying attention to the differences in people and how they process things is helpful. Like I take people into areas where I work where there's a lot of suffering, and people have different sensitivities for that. So I find like debriefing afterwards, or just keeping an eye, like some people, they just want to cry for 3 days after, and other people aren't as impacted emotionally from that. And so
you have to be very sensitive when you work with people. Yeah, we had, for example, we had a young lady that I knew from the application that she had a very broken family, like parents divorced, and she grew basically up at friends' houses and was like living wherever she could. And for us, it was a big concern because where she would serve, we have a big orphan care program here with 400 orphans. And would she identify herself with the problems that the kids had? So we had a very close eye on her and met with her and kind of like just fellowship with her and ask questions. Hey, how are you doing today? What you saw today, how does it affect you? And you have to be very sensitive when you work with people in general, but specifically with people that come from a place where they maybe have never seen suffering or hunger or you name it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered, like, if you guys sort of serve as that, as a counseling position. That's what most small nonprofits do anyway. I don't know about larger ones, may have like a, you know, counselor on staff or whatever. I mean, I sure don't, you know.
We don't have it specifically for our volunteers that we as a designated person, but we have myself and my wife, so we kind of like tag team it.
Yeah.
And then we have the pastoral stuff that we refer people to if needed. And sometimes it's also sometimes the people don't open up to one person, so you kind of like look, okay, who is she opening up or who is he opening up to? So we had volunteers that had a very good connection to me. They were talking to me about everything. And then you had volunteers that didn't open up to me, and they were more talking to my wife or to someone else within the organization. But having someone that is like keeping an eye on them is always good.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful.
I'll just ask a very quick question. Akki, do you prefer to have long-term volunteers or short-term volunteers? Who are the easiest to deal with?
I prefer long-term volunteers, but I also enjoy working with short-term volunteers, like for example 2 weeks or a week, because they can, for example, tackle projects. We had Ryan, Kevin's son, they came twice with an architectural group, and they were there for 2 weeks or for 10 days. And we were very focused on this project and very able to tackle a lot of work in a short period of time. But if you have a long-term volunteer, you need to put more training into them, but it's a bigger benefit on the long run, because they can take over tasks, they can take over responsibilities to a certain extent, which you would normally do by yourself. So there's a benefit in both.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
And also what we normally use, if, for example, now the lady that comes in November, she comes over our 6 weeks summer break. That means we ask her to come at least 3 to 4 weeks before the holidays, so that she can kind of like transition into the job and then learn on the go, but then she can be slotted into helping on the holidays. So there is a crunch time where it's good for us to have people on the ground, but it's very difficult if the people arrive on the day the holiday program starts. So we ask her to come earlier, which then is a short-term volunteer as well.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting. Thanks, Akki.
Thank you, Akki. Ladies, is that it?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Thank you. I'll hand back over. Akki, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Akki, for coming.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.